nốt meng
ให้หนูเป็นคนเปลี่ยนเดี๋ยวนัดจะเป็นคนเปลี่ยนสไลด์เอาเปลี่ยนเลย Hello. Hi, so good evening, everyone. May I have your attention? Please. So good evening to our members and also special guests tonight. For those who don't know me, I am Jitikan Ornuchi, a geologist from SPE Thailand, and I am a member of the SPE Young Professional Thailand, and today I am so honored to be your MC for tonight. And on behalf of the SPE Thailand Board of Directors, I would like to welcome all of you to tonight's special joining event between SPE Thailand and the AIEN technical meeting. And thank you for showing up. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are happy to see many of you both from oil and gas industries, service companies, also government representatives, and also the academic folks from the upstream oil and gas supporting our event tonight. And also, it's a special welcome to our students. We are so glad to see that a lot of young generations here interested in participating in the technical meeting. So can you raise your hand up if you are students so we know where you are? Thank you, so very welcome. Okay, so actually, before we proceed on to our agenda, as our safety is the first priority in our industry, right? So on the safety and today we have no fire drill tonight. So in case that there is any alarm, please remain calm and then slowly walk to the emergency exit. And from there, the hotel staff will take care of you, and we will walk to the assembly point outside of the hotel. But importantly, please remain calm and do not rush at all. And now for our agenda tonight, I will start with the section announcements, basically the highlights of our activities. And then we'll move to the main course, which is our presentation from AIEN tonight. And then with the question and answer, and of course, we will end our night with a lucky draw. So please stay tuned. So, I will not go through all of this because I believe that you know who our SPE, who we are, and then later in the following slide we will have a moment for our representative from the AIEN to introduce himself and to all of us to know. However, what I would like to mention here is that the vision of our two societies, SPE and also AIEN, are very similar, which is sharing. We like to share our knowledge, share our information, and also share our fun and joy from networking together. So now, before we begin the next section, I would like to welcome Kun Jo from AIEN to introduce the AIEN to all of us. Please give a round of applause. To highlight, click in the middle, and then the.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Thanks to the SPE folks, Ronald, Casey, and thanks for the introduction. My name is Joe Tomkowitz. I'll do this quick. The AIEN is having an event from June 11th to the 13th. Those are the dates I'd like you to remember, June 11 to 13. And in advance of that, we're going to have a pre-event on April 23rd. That's a Tuesday. This is for our International Energy Summit. Got some slides. AIEN is based in Houston. We have about 3,000 members. We're in about 180 companies. I might have some of those numbers wrong as I go forward here. But we have, I think, what the industry considers to be the best model contract database. And if you join the AIEN, you can use those for free, and you can meet the 3,000 members. But I also think we have some of the best events next to SPE. I know I've seen a lot of you over the years at SPE events in the region. I think they're the best. I think AIEN also provides excellent energy summits in many locations. And we have this similar list of sponsors to you, same community. I think we're like-minded, but I also think we're progressive and like-minded. And like I said, we have our event coming up. It's 2 full days of sessions and 1 full day of workshops. Going to have over 40 speakers, and we're going to have topics: oil, gas, going to do LNG, going to talk about renewables, and we're going to have workshops on all the above. Here's some of the speakers. Hopefully you can see that. Do we have screens in back, Ron? Are there screens back there? Okay. So you can see that a lot of our friends here, Kun Montri speaking again. I think some of you may have seen Kun Sean speak last week at his 1-year anniversary party. And a lot of local folks here, Harold Link from Thailand. 3-day event. We'd love to hear you. You can email me, reach out to me. I'm here with my colleague Mint. Kun Mint is from Chevron. And so if you want to speak Thai, don't want to speak to me in English, please, you can try Mint. But we're both here to answer questions. We'd love to see you. June 11 to 13, AIEN. Please look us up. I think that's my last slide. Thank you very much. And Ronald, thanks for the time today. I appreciate SPE letting us do this, and I'm really looking forward to our speaker. Great law firm out of Singapore, important topic. And so I'm excited to be here, and it's good to see you all again. So thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Kun Joe. So don't forget, if anybody wants to reach out, AIEN, you can contact any of your channels on the screen here. And so next, as now that we are hearing from AIEN already, let's go back to SPE for a little bit. So here, as you see on the screens, are our sponsors. So thank you very much. These are valuable sponsors that's supporting us, SPE, supporting our technical meeting throughout the season. And so any of you who may just join the meeting maybe for the first time, or your company symbol maybe not showing up here yet. And if you would like to sponsor us, please feel free to reach out to SPE Thailand. Don't hesitate, we do need you. And just a little bit wrap up about our SPE members. And today we have the valid members, over 600 total members. So hooray, we have pretty high number. We have more than 330 professionals, and the outstanding number is about 245 students. So we are glad that we have a lot of young students that are interested in this field to joining us more. However, as you see on the screen, we still have a pretty high number, around 138 members that has yet to renew their membership with SPE. And if you are one of them, or if you don't know, please check your member status. So welcome to renew or rejoin our SPE again. So I want to persuade you, but I will not go through all of this benefit for being the SPE memberships. As you know, SPE Thailand is one of the most active association, or the members that we have a lot of technical meeting every month. We have networking, and we have a lot of activities going on. So please come join us. And if your colleague haven't joined us yet, we are very welcome. And now we are moving to the main course or our main presentation that, like I mentioned earlier, the collaboration between SPE Thailand and AIEN. So before I hand it over to our guest speaker today, I would like to welcome Kun Kasianนะคะ to introduce our speaker to us.
Thank you, Kun Nuch. Very exciting introduction, actually. Quite a good one. For those who do not know me, my name is Kasian. I'm the SPE Thailand Program Chair. And always I'm going to do the introduction of the speaker this evening. But before that, tonight something very special. We see a lot of the students. And again, as she mentioned, we really appreciate students coming because you are our future. And this kind of event, I think, is something that kind of introduce you to start joining the E&P industry. So keep joining us, welcome, and ask the questions, okay? All right, so without further ado, let me do the speaker introductions. So our speaker tonight advises on ranges of energy and trade and finance matter with particular expertise in international commercial arbitrations, investigations, and public international law. He has a strong legal and commercial understanding of the trade and energy, including oil and gas, mining, natural resources, renewable, infrastructure, and finance sectors. The speaker is experienced in working with most international arbitration rules and recognized institutions and frequently appear as counsel before arbitral tribunals. He has also advised clients regarding regulatory and internal investigation and appear as a counsel before regulatory tribunals. His client ranges from sovereign states, state-owned entities, and multinational and domestic companies to trading house, private equity firms, and family offices. He has more than 15 years of legal experience across Asia Pacific, Europe, and Middle East, having previously worked at Australian, English, and American law firm, including 6 years in Hong Kong. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me for a very warm welcome. Our speaker this evening, Mr. John Zadkovich from Penningtons, Manches, and Coopers.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Cassian. First and foremost, I want to just echo Cassian's comments to the students here that are attending. From my behalf, you are indeed the future of an industry that is under increasing scrutiny and pressure from policymakers and interest groups. Make no mistake, oil and gas is fundamental to the future. It is fundamental to the energy markets globally. It is intrinsic to the prosperity of humanity in general. So please do not question for a moment your choices in entertaining a future in the oil and gas industry, because you are well received and you have a very prosperous future ahead of you all. So please take that with you. On to other matters. Equally, thank you to SPE and AIEN for inviting me to present here. Some of you may be familiar with me. I've presented to the audiences here before over the years. I indeed love coming to Bangkok. I've attended many a conference here. I do have, in fact, a bit of a love for all things Thailand. 1, fantastic people. 2, awesome food. And 3, I proposed to my wife here in Bangkok just last year. So yes, thanks for the yours. And I'm not going to now bore you with a romance story. That's not what I'm here for this evening. I'm here to deliver something a little bit more turgid. So a quick agenda of sorts. I'm not going to read through that. You can all clearly read. But we do have a bit of material to cover this evening. There is going to be some Q&A at the end of it. And indeed, I'll be around after the presentation, as will Nick. Nick, if you can just raise your hand, my colleague from Penningtons. Nick is also an expert in the oil and gas industry. So if you have any questions arising out of this or anything generally, please don't hesitate to contact us. So, energy. Firstly, a lot of individuals and a lot of policymakers tend to conflate energy with electricity. The reality is electricity is all but one form of energy. Energy takes a lot of forms. Now, the significance of energy cannot be overstated. In 2000, a former Nobel laureate identified, the key problems to humanity. You have 10 of them listed there. That's not really changed. At the top of the chart is always energy. Now, I'm not going to go into the detail, but just look around you. Everything in this room is the product of some form of energy. We need it to survive. Humanity needs it to prosper. It's as simple as that. Now, this is not a new thing. This has been around for many, many years. We've, of course, seen different transitions in energy. We had wood, we had coal, we had oil, we've had gas. We're now looking at a different cycle where we're moving more towards renewables. But on the subject of electricity, those of you who are history buffs will identify the gent in the bottom corner there, F.D. Roosevelt, former US president. He identified very early, I think it was about 1930 in the US, that the way to develop the country was to bring electricity to the masses. So many decades, nearly a century ago, it's been identified electricity as a form of energy really does play a pivotal role in driving humanity. But it's not without its challenges. We hear quite frequently, and there's going to be a number of choice terms, phrases. One of them is the energy trilemma. A number of you will have already heard about this, and we're going to touch upon this and a couple of other concepts. And this is very, very material in the current climate for reasons I'll go into shortly. Well, we have three effective pillars. We have energy security, energy sustainability, and energy affordability. Now, in an ideal world, the policymakers like to have a nice balance between these to make sure we've got enough energy at home to provide for the home state, it's affordable and it's sustainable. Now, if we lived in Disneyland, that would be the reality. We don't. We're not in Disneyland. We're in actually quite a challenging period of time. Now, unless you had your head stuck in the sand for the last several years, you'd appreciate that security globally has come to the forefront. We have, of course, the war in the Ukraine. That has had a profound effect on energy globally, both here and further afield. And it is still a key issue. We have, of course, the issues and the conflict in Gaza, in Israel at the moment. We also have the knock-on effect of that in the Red Sea. If we look further afield across to South America, we have Venezuela now threatening to invade Guyana. Significant oil reserves offshore there. If that was to take place, and there's a number of the majors in the room this evening that will appreciate, that is also going to have severe consequences adverse for the oil and gas sector. Some other issues when we look as to the energy trilemma. The wars in particular, they really draw the attention to the security issue. And that's why we see a lot of nations and states who are trying to now nationalize assets in order to ensure their citizens have energy. Because the reality is, at the end of the day, if the lights go off, the government's going to get kicked out. Pure and simple. And policymakers appreciate this. But we also have a number of other competing factors. We, of course, have our Just Stop Oil friends, among other protesters, who are very passionate advocates for a more sustainable environment. And I don't think any of us for a moment say, well, that's a nonsense. We all do want a sustainable environment. We want a measured approach. But the reality is, sometimes I don't think they actually understand the nuances of the energy sector. Case in point, you'll often see them. I've lived in London a number of years. You would frequently see the protesters with their protest signs using oil-based paints, with their shoes, which are typically Wellingtons made of oil-based rubbers, with their mobile phones in their plastic cases. I could go on and on. But the point being is that the opportunity for me to present here, as I do on a number of other occasions, is more so just education, bringing to the forefront of people a better understanding as to the energy sector. Because whenever these issues are typically raised in some forums, as soon as you question sustainability or anything, you're immediately deemed to be a climate change denier, a flat earther, a Trump supporter. The list goes on and on. But the reality is, this is about being a critical thinker, understanding both sides of the argument. And I hope at the end of today's presentation, I leave you with a better understanding. So next time you are at that dinner with friends and these subjects come up, you can speak with some conviction as to your understanding. Another concept you probably hear, in addition to the energy trilemma, is the energy transition. Now, this gets back to the point I made earlier insofar as we've moved steadily through a series of energy sources, from wood to coal to oil to gas. And the latest transition is, of course, we're looking at more renewable, sustainable energies. But one thing that is often lost on policymakers is it is not the same thing for all states and for all consumers. That's why I typically refer to it, as does Nick, just energy transitions. This needs to be an equitable approach. And there are multiple transitions. A friend of ours in the mining sector said it is pivotal when we contemplate the energy transition. It depends on the lens through which you look at. So it is all very well for certain policymakers and the like in Europe to be making directives about how the energy future should be. But that is of little consequence to the populations in an emerging market, where they are very much dependent on more traditional fuels. Because, for example, certain neighbouring states to here, without coal, the lights go off. The lights go off in the hospitals. The hospitals stop operating. So, with greatest respect to certain policymakers, I don't think it is right for them to lecture other states as to what their energy transitions should look like, because it is different for each state. Every state has its own drivers, economic and otherwise. So ESG. This is a very simple acronym. I'll leave you to quickly digest that, but it is something that is more and more commonly found in every energy conversation we have. Doesn't matter which part of the value chain you operate in. ESG, if you're not already familiar with it, this is going to be a big part of your future. Now, for the students in particular, you are going to be hearing more and more of this, and this is not a bad thing, don't get me wrong. Again, the purpose of my presentation is to help educate, help you understand what this means. And ESG presents some opportunities. It also presents some challenges. And one thing in particular, before I move on from this slide, is whereas environmental, social, and governance are all to be viewed in an ideal world as being equal, the reality is, when we look at, from my perspective, and I think I speak for Nick and a number of others as well, the E is being prioritised above all else. The environment is a very key concern, and that's laudable. I'm not debating that. But we're finding more and more with all industries, in particular the finance sector, that they are more and more focused on the environment and less on the social and the governance piece. And I won't mention the bank or the banker, but a senior executive recently told me in Hong Kong at an energy and finance conference that the key driver to just energy transitions and balancing the energy trilemma in the emerging markets is very much on the governance point, not strictly on the E point. But again, The just energy transition means different things to different players. And of course, a lot of the capital is in Europe, is in North America, but they are prioritizing, unfortunately, for some people, the energy piece or the environment piece. So, why does it matter? As I said, you'll be finding ESG in all manner of documents now, all manner of contracts, and more regulations that I'll come to. It is a rapidly evolving field. There's probably not a week that goes past Nick and I don't read in some headline or some legal journal there are new ESG laws or regulations coming to bear or changing. It is, in fact, it's a hard area to keep across. But those of you in the energy sector will appreciate your remit is very rarely purely domestic. You also need to consider what is happening in the broader space. You are looking at the region, APAC, you're also looking further afield to other markets. And that is very good, that's laudable. And I'm going to come to the reasons why you need to be doing this more so. But the other thing with ESG is companies in the energy sector, you are under the greatest scrutiny of all the players in all the sectors. Unfortunately, a number of policymakers are very keen to demonise the oil and gas industry. So you are being heavily scrutinised. You're under the microscope. And this is an opportunity. Get it right. And you can really send the right message to society and the policymakers. Get it wrong, and they will very happily crucify you. So ESG, it is very simply, it's about accountability. We are seeing more and more disclosure frameworks coming to bear. We have voluntary frameworks. We also have mandatory compliance regulated frameworks. Now, I've spoken to a couple of the attendees here at the drinks before, and a number of you are already familiar with the disclosure requirements. Let me put it very simply. Depending on your business, which jurisdiction you're in, and who your counterparties are, you're probably already, if you're not aware of it, or you will soon find, you will have to make periodic disclosures as to what your carbon emissions are, what your certain social attributes are, and your governance. And by that, it could be something on the social, so simple as diversity and inclusion, and on the governance, it could also be equally what anti-slavery, anti-child labour policies you might have in place. And this is growing and growing. Now, on the one hand, it is a cost consequence. So businesses have to sop this up. But on the other, if you don't, and this is probably one of the key messages I want to instill on you all, if you don't get this, if you don't start turning your minds to it, if you haven't already, you're going to be left behind. Because the global market is very, very much focused on ESG. And they'll be looking to players in the emerging markets, as well as through APAC, to make sure that their ESG goals are aligned with what foreign investment and trading partners are also looking to do. But it's not all simple. So I said there's a number of disclosure regimes. There's a lot. It is very, very hard, some comments in the Financial Times recently, to find a consensus. There is no absolute gold standard. So a lot of businesses are left wondering, where do we start? Who do we actually, which standard do we adopt? Now that's going to be on a case-by-case basis. Where is your business located? Where are your assets? Where is your carbon footprint? Where is your production? Where are your plants? It's going to be a combination of those. You might find part of your business traverses into a mandatory disclosure of, jurisdiction. Some of it might be voluntary. So if you're hoping I'm going to give you a quick fix answer, sadly I can't, because it is very much going to depend on a case-by-case basis. But this is very amusing. I like this. When I said ESG is becoming more and more important, and we're seeing it in the dialogue, if you read that, it did make me laugh. and this may well be an indictment on certain Brits. I'm not the author, so I'm just going to repeat. But more Brits believe in aliens than are familiar with ESG. It's funny, but by the same token, it's sad. It's a sad indictment on, a developed market that is looking to really lead the world on ESG, yet its own population is lagging. And there's more on this. This journalist, I do like it. There's another piece from him later. But this is one of the cruxes, as I mentioned. Some of you might be sitting here thinking, I'm a small business, or my business is all very domestic, not really my concern. I would say that's not correct. Now, we're going to be seeing more and more regulation in the space, and I'm going to come to certain Thai laws on point. And in fact, at the moment, there is a discussion paper out by the Thai government on the climate change law. So the Thai businesses, you're going to be having disclosure obligations when it comes to ESG. So this does matter. Now, that has all been mapped out. As I said, it's out for discussion and consultation. So it'll be interesting to see where the Thai government positions this. It's likely to follow like certain European and other laws. If you're a big business, you can expect to have more onerous obligations. So that is one element. There's going to be a regulatory piece. But for all of you, it's also important to consider the counterparty piece. Now, by counterparty, it might be somebody you're contracting with. It might be investors you're looking to attract. More and more, they're all looking at what are your ESG credentials. Now, I do a lot of work with investors, private equity, private credit, venture capitalists and the like. And many of them, one of the first things they want to see in an investment pitch in the first few pages is, what are their ESG credentials? What are they doing? Because these companies, these investors, do not want to be aligned with a target that is going to fall foul and brings disrepute to them or their investment. And equally, counterparties are now being regulated such that they also need to look at what their counterparties are doing. And by that I mean, we look at as to the EU. The EU's just passed recently a directive on the due diligence of companies. And by that, they're looking at the full value chain. So European companies, when they start contracting with other counterparties, the first party, they need to look at the counterparty. They need to look at the full supply chain. What is that supply chain? What are all those companies doing when it comes to ESG? So for those of you who have a business here that has opportunities feeding back into Europe, and you look at the figures, the Thai economy, I think there's about 8% of exports go to Europe. This is going to become more and more important. But it's not just Europe that has adopted this. The UK is looking at adopting it. Singapore is looking at adopting something similar. And equally so is Australia. So you've only got to look regionally as well, and you will see this is becoming a growing obligation. So don't be surprised next time you go to pitch to renew a contract you've been doing for years and years, and you think it's relatively safe. The other party says, we'd like to see your ESG credentials now. So again, I'm going to stress this. If anything you take away from today's presentation, please turn your minds to what can you do to get an ESG policy in place if you haven't already, because that may be the defining point that puts you in front of your competitors. Now, Thailand is already a focal point for all things energy transition, and to that end, ESG. We're seeing globally a dramatic shift of capital and investment from China, and it's starting to find new markets in production and otherwise. We're seeing a lot of capital move to the likes of Australia and India, but we're also seeing a lot of capital coming to the likes of Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia. And it's encouraging to see, for example, BMW opening up a battery plant here. But we get back to my point earlier. The fact that BMW has shifted that plant here does not negate its obligations insofar as disclosure. It is going to be heavily looking at the subsidiary here. And the subsidiary here is going to be looking at the counterparties here. So you can see how the tentacles of this matrix grow ever more. So, as I already alluded to, there's going to be more and more disclosure obligations across all businesses. As I said, also, this is not a bad thing. I'm not one of those lawyers that want to tell you, do this or you go to jail and you die. That's not the case. But it's an awareness point. So it's just simply to stress that this is coming. A lot of businesses may not be across it, but the requirements led by countries regions such as the EU and the US, they're filtering down. More importantly as well, we have, of course, the European Union's introduced CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. So there is going to be the requirement, if you're in a jurisdiction producing goods that go into Europe that aren't already subject to a carbon tax, you're going to be hit with one as you try to enter the European markets. That said, I mentioned the new Thai Climate Change Act, the law that's being contemplated. That is also going to have a tax. So that may balance things out. We'll have to wait and see. So that's on the ESG piece. Let's shift focus now to greenwashing. As I've mentioned, there's a lot of emphasis on ESG. A lot of companies are wanting to put their best foot forward as to what their ESG credentials are. But now we've got a situation, so many companies are desperate to distinguish themselves, they're basically exaggerating their credentials. They're misleading investors, they're misleading counterparties. And this is not limited to companies, let me stress that. It's also being done by governments. And I'm going to come to a couple of examples. So whenever we hear greenwashing, it's normally aligned with, there's certain labels such as this. If you go to your grocery store, no doubt you'll see it on certain products. Or if you have a service provider, some of them also might use similar terminology. Some of them might be correct. That's absolutely fine. But it is becoming a bit of a rubber stamp with some groups. Let's just break it down a bit first before we go into the full body of greenwashing. What is green? Now, each of you will have your own perception or understanding as to what is green. And I don't think there'd be too much difference between us. But when you look as to how green has shifted in a definition in this context, it's interesting to see how we've gone from a rather general analysis to scope 1, and now we're looking scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. It is all-encompassing. But it gets even more confusing. Or does it? Now, certain of these headlines are very, good at grabbing the attention of readers. So the EU included nuclear in its Green Investment Guide. Certain interest groups were up in arms. What they fail to appreciate is you look as to the likes of Germany and how much lignite coal it burns and how much fuel energy it takes from France, which is nuclear produced, and you look as to the carbon footprint of nuclear power stations, it does have merit. We look also as to the EU including mining. And again, there's a perception among some, mining is dirty, it's not environmentally friendly. But make no mistake, mining is intrinsic to just energy transitions. Whether you're looking as to the generation, the storage, or the transmission, mining and metals are fundamental. You simply have to have mining to get there. The average wind turbine, 150 tons of steel. And for offshore cabling, for the offshore wind farms, for every metre, you're looking about 50 kilos of copper. So for those who start demonizing mining in addition to oil and gas, again, I implore them, please take a moment to actually understand the subject matter. Of course, we have more recently Indonesia introducing its taxonomy on its environmental plans, and it included coal-fired power stations. And again, straight away, the usual groups are up in arms. This is a travesty. Now, it's a lot more detailed than that. Now, Nick and I were in Jakarta just 2 weeks ago speaking to a number of the energy majors about this. And when you dig down into the detail of the taxonomy, it is not as simple as a new coal-fired power station is green. It's a lot more nuanced as to the levels of emissions it has to reduce over the years. And let's not also forget, a country with a population of over 260 million, as I said, just energy transitions, it means different things for different countries. So I don't think it's right for policymakers in the Northern Hemisphere to be pointing the finger at, say, the Indonesians when they are doing what they can, but at the end of the day, they still need to have power. That said, the issue of greenwashing is a problem. We see that there are a lot of businesses that exaggerate their green claims. This is also common here in Thailand, and I'll come to that. And the question begs, why? Why would you do that? Why would you mislead? And it's quite obvious why a number of these companies do so. One, you want to attract investment. As I said, some of the biggest PE funds, one of the key criteria for their investments are strong green credentials. So companies want to attract that. So they will exaggerate what their credentials are. Equally, governments are devoting millions, if not billions, into this space. And at a time after COVID, inflationary cycles and the like, everybody's looking for capital. So if you can attract subsidies or grants or concessions, I can understand why some businesses might do that. I'm not saying it's justified, but the motivations are clear. Another reason is they want to placate certain investors' concerns. I'm going to come to some of these issues shortly, where we're seeing growing investor activism on these very points. So in order to curtail or placate certain of those actions, we see some companies who are a little bit more generous than they should be as to their green credentials. And equally, they just want to improve their image. I mean, it's hard enough now, those of you who are in the oil and gas industry, as I said, you go to a dinner somewhere and you're asked, where do you work? What sector? And you say oil and gas. Some might go, oh. It does sometimes bring that response. I love it. I'm a litigator and an advocate, so I love that argument. And yes, I ruin dinner, and my wife doesn't like it, but I do. So that's just me. As I said, greenwashing, we do see a bit of it here in Thailand. You know, Thailand's not innocent when it comes to this. We do have, you know, an economy that is attracting, as I've alluded to, more and more investment in this space. And the businesses here are savvy, very commercial. You want to take advantage of these just energy transitions and try to capitalize on the opportunities. However, it's not necessarily the right thing to do. So, what is greenwashing? At its most basic, it's just simply a misrepresentation or a fraud. It's telling a porky pie a lie. But it is not strictly what is said, it is also what is not said. I'm going to come to a case and example where that was the view taken by a regulator. But greenwashing falls largely into several categories. So we have corporate and government commitments. And again, I'm not letting the governments or the policymakers off the hook here. It's very easy for them frequently to point the finger at the energy sector generally and say you're doing all the greenwashing, but we're going to see some cases in example where it is the policymakers who are the ones who are greenwashing. But we also have in the instance of certain products alleging to be very, very green and environmentally friendly. Reality is they're not. And also, we have a number of investment vehicles that are structured with a view of attracting investment to invest in green projects. Reality is sometimes they don't. So in some jurisdictions, we already have some very prescriptive and well-defined anti-greenwashing laws, and they're operating rather swimmingly. The EU is one of the regions that is at the forefront with this, and they're actually have just introduced a new directive. This is quite interesting. The Greenwashing Directive is going to ban certain green labels companies put to their products and their services unless they're justified, unless they can prove the claims. And I think that's sensible, because it's all too easy for someone to just slap a label on a business or a product and say, I'm green, and you can perhaps command a premium or attract more investment. So this really shifts the onus to those businesses in that you can't do that unless you can justify it. So I think full marks to the EU on that front, but they're not alone there. But equally, as I said, a couple of the reasons why you want to be turning your minds to ESG. One, your counterparties and your investors are looking at it. But two, you've got to be careful. You've got to get your ESG right, not overstate matters, because you could be subject to repercussions, administrative fines, and in some instances, criminal fines. So when I say this is a maze, a rich maze of different laws, I'm not going to talk through this. I'm not going to read it line by line, because I'm sure you'd all throw your glasses at me. But this just gives you a snapshot as to when Nick and I are talking to clients globally. We have a balance of all these different laws. Each state has its own laws. There is a common theme to them, however. You know, in your own time, you could perhaps request the slides and go through that or review this on YouTube. But there is a common theme. And when we look as to the position here in Thailand, it is very much aligned with what we're seeing in other jurisdictions. We see in particular certain consumer laws. They're not strictly designed to prevent greenwashing, but they are responsive to greenwashing by companies. We also have the criminal code here, which is responsive to fraud. So a higher level of culpability and proof required when you have certain egregious claims that are made. There is also the opportunity for civil claims in the event your counterpart sells you a lie as to their green credentials you rely on. You do have recourse. More importantly, as I've mentioned already, there is a new law that is going to be coming to Thailand. And no doubt there's some lawyers in the audience here that will be more versed on it than I am, but it is going to have a significant change. You're going to be having carbon taxes. You're going to be having disclosure obligations as well. Now, how that looks at the end of the day remains to be seen. As I said, it's out for consultation, but that is one to watch for. So when I said it's not strictly about what is said, but what is not said. This was a case last year in the United Kingdom. Shell put up a number of adverts, basically showing off some of its green ambitions. The advertising standards received a complaint from a few interest groups saying, this is misleading. Shell's advocating its green credentials. It's saying nothing about the oil and gas industry it's involved in. Now, from a legal perspective, I think that's an absurdity. I think you would have to have your head in the sand to not appreciate Shell has been involved in oil and gas for quite some time. There's many a service station around that demonstrates that. However, in this instance, the advertising agency upheld the complaint and said, yes, Shell, you should be also including the downside as to your environmental footprint. And I do question where one draws the line, how you can advocate and be ambitious as to promoting a green future if you're also expected to bring all your past sins, to use the term, into context. I really struggle with where the balance is. But when I talk about those who offend or contravene or make greenwashing claims, it isn't just big business or small business. It is also certain policymakers. Case recently in the United Kingdom, the Transport for London, which is effectively runs the buses and the trains, it was basically found to be greenwashing for that statement. One of the most polluting places in London is inside your car. It was held to be unfounded. But we've also got the likes of certain industry leaders, which is good to see, who are now starting to get on the front foot and pushing back against the policymakers, saying, you're also guilty of greenwashing. You're pushing an agenda which is going to lead to very high prices. We come back to the energy trilemma. Security, sustainable, affordable. They tend to ignore the affordability. And again, I'm not for just energy transitions, but I think it is remiss of policymakers not to include the cost consequences. And again, we're in an inflationary cycle and we're all feeling the pinch. And this is something that is overlooked. But one other point, the lovely private jet down the corner there. So COP28 in Dubai last year, over 500 private jets attended. So you look as to how many individuals there, depending on the private jet, it can be 10 to 100 times more polluting than a commercial jet. So it's all very well for the policymakers and certain bigwigs to turn up and start lecturing us all on our carbon emissions. Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister, he took a private jet, but he said it used SAF, sustainable aviation fuel. It didn't use 100% SAF. It probably only used an absolute fraction. But again, for somebody who is also pushing for a green agenda, I think practice what you preach. Equally to King Charles, he took a private jet. And it is not just at COP28, Davos recently as well, over 350 private jets. So please, and I direct this to those on YouTube, should they be listening, don't lecture us on these things. Practice what you preach. But when we look regionally as well, who is at the vanguard when it comes to greenwashing laws? Those of you would have picked up that I'm an Australian, and this is not, preaching as to Australia above all, but the Australian regulators are really at the top of their game here. They are driving this. They are bringing administrative prosecutions, criminal prosecutions, issuing fines. They are getting the full support of state and federal governments. The corporate regulator and the consumer regulator are really going hard. And more importantly, neighbouring states are also looking as to Australia. What can they learn from it? Singapore in particular. And I would not be surprised if your own regulators here are paying attention. Put aside the regulatory consequences for getting it wrong for a moment. There's also another aspect we're seeing from a legal perspective. That is the investors and interest groups taking action. And some of them are absolutely right to do so. There has been some abhorrent behaviour by some energy companies when it comes to environmental, social and governance issues. Absolutely. But they are armed to the teeth now. There's litigation funds that have got pools of cash, tens of millions, ready to go after energy companies. Energy companies have deep pockets. There's a lot of capital there. So you can bring an environmental claim. You have a good target to go after. This gets into a bit of the legalese. We're also seeing, especially in certain common law jurisdictions, an increase in what's called a statutory derivative action. I'll break that down for you in the sense that what we're finding is we have interest groups or protest groups who will take a small shareholding in a public company. And depending on the jurisdiction, it only needs to be a very, very small piece. In doing so, that gives them legal standing to bring a claim against the company's directors, saying they are not acting in the company's interests or the shareholders' interests. Now, this has happened on a number of occasions already in the United Kingdom and also in the US. Now, the courts are loath to step into the shoes of the company's directors. So the courts so far have said, sorry, we don't buy it. We're not going down that path. But this is becoming more common. And in the case here, where we had Climate Earth, after they lost at first instance and lost on appeal, they said, we're fine with that. We've got our message across. So that's all very well, but in doing so, you've caused the shareholders and the company significant legal fees and achieved what? I'm not quite sure what their goal was there, because in my view, they failed. But some companies now are a bit tired of this, and they're actually striking back. What we've seen also, if it's not a statutory derivative action, we see some shareholders putting forward motions at AGMs in order to get a certain green agenda across the company's resolutions. And some of them, again, they might be perfectly valid. I have no issue with that. But some of them, again, are just trying to bring attention to their cause. In the case of Exxon, this is a very discrete area of SEC, US securities law, I'm not going to delve into. But the claim, or the motion that was put forward had been put forward repeatedly and knocked back. Exxon basically has lost its patience and pushed them and basically banned that. I'm mindful as to time, so I'm going to move along. So one other area we need to be careful of is the flip side of greenwashing is green hushing. So you have some companies, as I said, that are exaggerating claims. You've got others now that are keeping quiet. And you can see some of the figures there. A recent poll by South Pole, 70% of companies are basically, deliberately withholding their green ambitions. And it's understandable why. I've just gone through a number of the regulations, the repercussions, the shareholder actions. It's understandable why certain companies are now keeping quiet and being more discreet. But when you factor in the disclosure obligations, it is going to become a challenge how to balance this. And I'm going to come to how that can be achieved. But green hushing generally, it isn't a positive. It doesn't provide for an open sharing of information. It doesn't give investors, a full window as to what the company is doing. So you can be satisfied, is this company aligned with your own investment goals, yours and your children for that matter? So how to strike a balance? Amazing, be honest. I know. It is as simple as that. Don't overstate it. Be able to justify your credentials. It's pretty straightforward. If you're unsure, use qualified statements. We see these in IPOs, capital raises all the time. Don't use black and white terms. Be modest. There's nothing wrong with being modest. If you can over-deliver at the end of the day, brilliant. But otherwise, be modest in your ambitions. And also, consider some guidelines. Some of the regulators out there have some very, very useful guidelines on where that balance lies, and I would encourage you to have a look at that. Now, Cassian's given me a polite prompt, so I could speak a day on this. But one consequence of greenwashing and green hushing and all of this is huge increase in green and red tape. For lawyers, brilliant, happy days. Nick and I are very happy. We love this. But for businesses, you don't. It frustrates your investments. It also frustrates your ability to fulfill projects. But I would say, again, as I've alluded to, if we're going to be looking at targeting companies for greenwashing or the like, let's also keep in mind the environmental groups and the policymakers. More importantly, Jim Ratcliffe came out with this classic statement: decarbonisation should not equal deindustrialisation. Very succinct phrase, but very, very profound. Or, and this was a bit tongue-in-cheek by the chap who made the reference to the aliens earlier on. Pay women, how do we get rid of ESG? Pay women less, burn more trees, push your staff to burnout. Your head of ESG will flee and no one will accuse you of greenwashing. If only. In concluding, so this is a rapidly evolving area. As you've seen all the laws, what's coming to Thailand and some of the other jurisdictions. Energy companies, you are in the sights. Everybody's looking at you, investors, regulators, counterparties. Your brand matters, both as a corporate and as an individual. Get it right. Learn about it, ask about it. And as I said earlier, because the tentacles of the likes of the EU and other jurisdictions are starting to look as to what the counterparties are doing in the value chain, get an ESG policy in place sooner than later. So it will put you in good stead. And if you're on equal pairing with a competitor who's ever got the ESG policy, is probably going to get the contract at the end of the day. So with that, I thank you for your kind attention. There's a lot of nods, and I look forward to some questions.
Any questions from the floor? Yes. Okay, I saw the hands there. I thought everyone is now very green. Please state your name.
Sanacha from Verera Energies. My question is there any relationship between the ESG and geopolitics?
Absolutely. There is, because depending on the geopolitics, again, it gets back to just energy transitions as well. There's different drivers for different states, for different economies, different populations. Some countries are more blessed with, let's say, sustainable power options than others. Case in example, I was presented with an opportunity, an investment project in Botswana. Now, Botswana has an abundance of coal bed methane. Now, instead, the Botswana people, they're basically bringing in power from South Africa and using diesel to generate power. They tried to raise money through certain development banks and European banks. They said, no, it's coal. You can't do that. So that jurisdiction, it was typically EU focused. They were applying that lens to saying, your ESG is not compatible with ours, therefore we won't invest and we won't give you the capital. Whereas for the Botswanans, they're resorting to burning wood, using diesel, some of the most greatest pollutants for energy. So yes, there is a very strong correlation between ESG and geopolitics.
Okay. Any hands? Okay, here.
Hi, I'm Franklin from Eco-Orient. First of all, thank you for your presentation. It's very good. My question is, what do you think are the main risks for businesses as they move towards energy transition?
I don't have 12 hours, but I'll try to give you, as they move to energy transition, again, one, I tend to refer to just energy transitions. As it means different things for different states, it means different things for different businesses as well. Businesses have to adapt. Businesses are typically very good at adapting, whether it's to the geopolitics in the question just mentioned earlier, technology, economic drivers, or the like. So businesses that are, let's say, committed to staying in, argument's sake, thermal coal, it's going to be very challenging. It is already very challenging for them to raise capital and secure finance. So businesses have to adapt. And to the extent they don't want to adapt voluntarily, governments are pushing them. Now, the raft of laws I've just shown you, there is growing obligations on disclosure requirements. There's going to be carbon taxes as well. So businesses will have to adapt, and they're going to have to adapt rather rapidly.
Okay, next questions. Okay. And the following one will be from students. You come here, you're eating a lot, you're drinking a lot, so prepare to ask as well.
No pressure, students.
So it feels like to me that in the ESG, S and G we've been doing for a long time. These are basic tickets to play. And so it's nothing new. In the E, it feels like it's a bit new, but this group of people in this room are highly technical. We measure everything around our operations. So segregating and allocating to carbon shouldn't be so hard for us. For me, the biggest question is your intersection of, and sorry, so please comment on that ESG. Do I get it right or not? It's not that hard for us. We're a very highly capable industry. But secondly, my question on the intersection between green hushing and greenwashing, to bring a quote up from the head of Americana Foods in Dubai, when we were trying to take him to 25-30% sustainable diesel for his fleet, he's like, I'm going to get attacked. If it's not over 50-60%, I'm going to get attacked. So I'm better to hush, was his view. So I'd just like to get your view on that green hushing versus greenwashing. And I suspect it's very different public companies versus private companies.
Okay, thank you. I'll take those. I'll take the first question first. You're absolutely right. And insofar as energy companies have been doing a lot on the ESG space, definitely. You look as to mining, I'm again from Australia, the mining companies with respect to social contributions, they have been at the forefront of that for decades. The governance insofar as, accountability, safe practices as well, they're world leaders. Same with the energy, oil and gas when it comes to safety. And that ties in with your social and your governance piece. They've always been doing that. And you're absolutely right. It's something that is often lost on a number of policymakers and the like, because they then just shift focus, but you're polluting. But it's not something the energy companies have ever denied. They do account for that. It's just simply becoming now the requirements and levels of disclosure are becoming greater and greater. We look back, say, 10, 20 years as we saw the evolution of what is green. It was at one period just scope 1. We're starting to now see a greater obligation for disclosure as to scope 2 and scope 3. So that is morphing. The energy companies, they're very good, gets back to the earlier question, at adapting. They will adapt. They're very good at adapting. And we've seen different cycles in, global energy markets, as I mentioned, wood, coal, oil, gas, and now we're looking at renewables. So we will see that to continue. Now, insofar as the greenwashing, green hushing, I sympathise with the company concerned, because that is a key point. That's why a number of groups are starting to keep quiet. They don't want to be scrutinised. They don't want to be held out. They don't want the social media bandwagon jumping down their throat. But your point as to the requirements between public and private is absolutely spot on, because the public companies typically have a greater requirement when it comes to disclosures. They're more heavily regulated by whether it's a regulator or listing rules. And if they've got multiple listings and multiple obligations, that is even broader still. Public companies have that. It goes with the territory. They typically also have more capital. So the argument would be they can absorb that and make those value decisions. Private companies, less so. And private companies, again, I can sympathise. You don't want to hold yourself out to fail and then be scrutinised or criticised, and it can be very hard for a small business. That's why you need to strike a balance. Be modest, be measured, and ensure you can actually justify what you're holding out to claim, or use qualified statements.
Okay, I start to see students secretly leaving the room. What happened? Okay, students.
Find a volunteer.
Okay, come back to you later. I'm just waiting for students first. Come on, volunteer students. There you go. Please state your name as well.
My name is Chittivat Jisili from Chulalongkorn University. I have a question about how can we measure the ESG potential?
How can you measure the ESG potential?
Yes.
I guess one way is you can look at the Paris Agreement as to what the goals are to reduce, keep the temperature down by 1.5 degrees Celsius. In doing so, if we measure output having regards to that, we will probably bring a better environment to humanity. We may not flood or result in a certain polar caps melting, greater pollution, higher temperatures. It is quite profound what we need to do on the environmental piece in order to bring about a more sustainable environment, not only for present generations, but also for future generations. So again, it is laudable, it is necessary, but getting there is a challenge. There is no quick fix. It means different things for different states. We have to balance the energy trilemma, for example. So that's not an easy question to summarize. There's academics, there's policymakers, there's many, many individuals who've written books, delivered speeches on this over the past decades. So it is fundamental. We do turn our minds to reducing temperatures, reducing carbon output, but it needs to be done in a just manner.
Thank you.
Okay, Kap. Any more questions from students? Any more? Okay, if not, then we'll go to the last one from Mr. AIEN.
I think his name's Joe.
Thanks. Enjoyed the presentation. I have a question for people here. You're a lawyer practicing law in Singapore. If we reached out to you and sent you documents we had that we wanted to make public, could you provide legal advice on if they would avoid or escape a greenwashing allegation or some type of item like that? Is that something you do?
I'm going to do the typical lawyer response. It depends.
Okay. All right.
It depends, one, on the jurisdiction, on governing laws, where the company is based, where its operations are based, where it might be selling into different markets. The short answer is it depends. Generally, yes. And if Nick and I couldn't, we could recommend someone that does. We have a very, very good sense as to the different laws. There is a degree of comity among the laws and regulations. And we also have a sniff test. We can sniff something and know if it's off when it comes to greenwashing. And most people have that already. So we can definitely assist on that front. So if anybody does have those concerns, please, we'll be more than happy to assist you with.
All right. Thank you very much.
We've got one more.
Okay, quick one. All right. I'm gonna run so you can ask quick.
For companies that want to know their green footprint, are there companies that audit you so that you can make your claim and it can be verified?
There are. There's quite a number of outfits that have now developed. I'm not going to mention names because certain of them I don't hold in high regard. But there are some private groups that will come in and they will prepare a policy for you. They will analyze your carbon footprint. They will go through the full value chain of your business to identify, how long your lights are on, what the carbon emissions will be as a consequence of that, the commuting of people, all of that, the diversity and inclusion. So it's a very rapidly growing industry. Now, some of them are good, don't get me wrong. Some of them are very, very competent. Others, perhaps less so. But they are They're a dime a dozen. And indeed, a large number of some of the bigger consulting firms currently offer that service as well. And some law firms do as well. We do. There's aspects we will look at, whether it can be the governance or the social perspective. But when it comes to the minutiae as to your carbon emissions, that sometimes does require someone with more technical skills to, again, analyse the full value chain. So we see a lot of that in Europe and North America.
Okay, thank you very much. So on behalf of SPE Thailand, may I invite Kun Jo? So on behalf of AIPN to present the token, AIEN, sorry, to present the token of appreciation to our speaker this evening. Thank you very much. And then the closing remarks.
Thank you all for your kind attention. Thank you for the questions. Again, thank you to the students. We're backing you. We're behind you, okay? We want to see you succeed because humanity in general, as I said, is very, very much dependent on energy. And you're the key to not only your future, but a lot of others. So please keep the faith. We're very proud of you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kun John, very much on a very impressive and also very interesting presentation. And I'm glad that we are aware of the ESG terms and also greenwashing, including green hatching as well. So thank you very much. And I know that you guys probably think that that's the end now, but no. Before we move to the lucky draw, we still have some highlights of the upcoming events that are organized by us to share to you all. So start off with the next technical meeting. So, well, next month is April, and most of you would know that April is actually the month that Thai is seriously celebrating the Splashing Water Festival. So we're gonna have a break on that one. We will resume in Major again in May, 16th of May, in the same place here. So we will have the SPE Distinguished Lecture Program, and we have a speaker from Aramco, Kun Hussein Al-Barani, under the topic of taking drilling and geomechanics to the digital world in the dynamic drilling environment. So see you in May. Don't forget, April we are on break. And beside the technical meeting, we actually have the activity for open to young professionals who are under 35 years old to participate in our umbrella design contest. Please come up with anything. You know, the theme is oil and gas industry. It would be fun, yes. You can somehow maybe immerse the ESG and also greenwashing terms into that design. Yes. And if your logo has been awarded or been selected, you will win 5,000 baht. And that logo or design will be printed on the umbrella and will be printed out as the SP umbrella gift. So please, I hope that, I know that a lot of young students here have a lot of creativity, so I hope to see a lot of submission. Speaking of the submission date will be on 25th of April. So don't enjoy too much fun on the water splashing. You still have something to work on. 25th of April is a deadline of the umbrella logo design. So looking forward to seeing all of those. And the next is the SPE Thailand EMP Award. So this is actually starting off October last year that we are opening for the abstract submission. So it's still continue now until the end of March. So before the Water Splashing Festival. So end of this month, please, if you still haven't submitted yet, think about of any abstract and then write it out and then submit to us. And we will announce the winner in the SPE Thailand season opening this year. So looking forward to that. And also, if there's still more upcoming events, you guys can check it out in our website here. The SPE.org, Asia Pacific, of course, so you can see what we have lining up. And we also have the Future Energy Asia coming up from 15 to 17 May as well. So this, not for the students, it's free for you all. So we hope that we will see a lot of students joining in this event too. And for us professionals, let's envisage the energy future together. So feel free to participate mid of May as well. And from the AIEN, Kunjo already mentioned this earlier, we have the International Energy Summit, and we will have some speakers from Thailand as well. Like mentioned earlier, Kun Montri from BTTEP and also Dr. Sean from Valora. So looking forward to it. It's still not ending. We are pretty busy. Still have some slides coming up. So the next one is the SPE and IADC Asia Pacific Joint Technology Conference and Exhibition, also coming back in Bangkok in August. So now you have May and August coming up as well. Well, last but not least, we still have SPWLA. So I know that most of you know the SPWLA, right? The petrophysics team. So we are calling for abstracts for the SPWLA Asia Pacific Regional Conference that we'll host during 6 to 9 October this year. So we are waiting for the abstract to be submitted under the theme of the traditional and transitional petrophysics, enhancing and integrating petrophysics into the challenges of today and tomorrow. So please spread these words to your colleagues or any person that you think that they might have a good topic to submit on this one. Yes, and to submit the abstract, the email would be ap2024@spwla.org. And the deadline will be 29th of March. So again, before the Water Splashing Festival. And now, I think it's still not time for lucky draw. We still have some slide coming up. Well, I don't want to say goodbye without telling you how to contact us. So you can see here we have the website. You can also email us. We have Facebook page. Look us up on LinkedIn, or you can also contact us via the Line official. So please feel free to scan the QR code to any of the channel, and don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are all kind and generous people. And now it's time for lucky draw. We will have 2 hours for tonight.
Okay, please draw one at a time.
The lawyer, let's be fair.
Can we?
No, I'll put it back. No, I'm joking. You might have to help me with the pronunciation. The company, this is like the Emmys or the Oscars. The company the individual is from is Weatherford. The individual, Sawanrat, forgive me if I pronounced that wrong, but Sawanrat from Weatherford. Let me get rid of this.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
nominations are, no, we now have a student. Now, I'm going to have to ask Cassian how I pronounce that university.
จุฬาลงกรณ์ University ครับ
And the individual, and again, my apologies in advance, but equally my surname, I'm sure many of you get that wrong as well. Sukrita?
สุกฤตา
Sukrita.
Okay, thank you very much ครับ
So, and now it's time for me to say goodbye on behalf of the SPE Thailand boards and directors. So, thank you all of you again to show up and also have fun after tonight. We still have time to enjoy, and don't forget, as I mentioned earlier, our vision as the society is to share. So, spend your time sharing knowledge and sharing networking. So, see you again in May. Thank you.
Just for your information, if you still enjoy drinks, we do have the 2-for-1 at the lobby. The secret code is SPE. Don't forget the secret code.